Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein, and this week we will be speaking about Techeiles. This week the Torah spoke about the Parsha of Tzitzis, so we will be speaking about what is arguably the biggest breakthrough in a mitzvah, maybe in 1,000 years, and we will have with us the great Goyen, Rabbi Yehudah David Bleich, who Rabbi Moshe Feinstein called Yedidi, and he is counter Techeiles, the new discovery. We will have from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Yisroel Barkin, who will present us with maybe 10 or 15 proofs that this is the current Techeiles. And we will have from Yerushalayim, Rabbi Nachum Eisenstein opining on this as well. You can find all our programs at headlinestorah.com. We also have a new app, and you can download it. It's Headlines Radio Show in one word, Headlines Radio Show. And if you download it in the past, you should update it because now it has a slide bar, so you can jump to any place you'd like to in the program. Now, additionally, what we started a number of weeks ago, and we'll do this week as well, is the initial interview with the Rabbanim goes usually very often longer than the hour. For example, in Techeiles, we have an hour 40. So on the app, you'll be able to pick up the entire program, which is longer than what we broadcast here on the radio. You can always call in on our hotline, 732-806-8700. You can email any questions to info@headlinesbook.com. I'd like to put in a small ad. From the Headlines program, we've also printed 2 books. And the last one, the first one, was the all-time bestseller for the OU. This one, I hope, will top the first one. It's called Headlines 2. Some of of our best programs are on there. DNA as halachic evidence. If Kim Davis were Orthodox, she issue a marriage license to same-sex couples? What is the definition today of what is not be kairos? What do we do with the disgraced rabbi? Unfortunately, that in the news. Criminals in shul. Should convicted felons be welcome in our communities? Unfortunately, we have so many of them dealing with the criminals in our community. We talk about fathering a child after death, the newest medical breakthroughs, artificial insemination for an unmarried woman. And we bring all the Rabbanim. In these articles, we bring all the Rabbanim. Could a doctor endanger himself to treat a patient? Aborting a fetus infected with the Zika virus, OCD in halacha, seducing the enemy, killing neutralized terrorists, Shabbos mode ovens, Ben Pakua meat, sherry cask whiskeys, all our favorite shows, Headlines 2. Go pick it up before it's sold out. This week's parsha is Shelach, and Shelach is about fear. The spies, they were afraid of entering the promised land. And what happens? We see a confrontation. What did they say? Loi nuchal alais. We can't reach the promised land. And what does Kalev say? Yachel nuchala. We can. With faith, with amunah, with perseverance, with passion. Right? Yeshua, kai shiacha, was amunah. Kalev is kulei lev. With passion, we can conquer what we were supposed to. Yachel nuchala. So this parsha is about fear, and the fear that keeps every one of us from reaching our promised land, from fulfilling our potential. The 2 meraglim in our head that say, you can't do it, it's too hard, it's too complicated, you're not smart enough. This parsha is about conquering fear. And I want to talk about 2 people. Sarah Shanira. It's 100 years. In 1917, she founded the first Beis Yaakov. You know who Sarah Shanira was? She was a girl, single girl, a Belza Chasidista. This is what she writes. As we pass through the Yamim Neirayim, the high holy days, fathers and sons travel to Ger, Alexander, Babov. She writes this in Poland, circa 1910. All those places that had made citadels of conceited religious life, dominated by the figure of a Rebbe's personality. But we stay at home, the wives, the daughters, the little ones. We have an empty yomtiv. It's bare of Jewish intellectual content. The women never learned anything about spiritual meaning that is concentrated in a Jewish yomtiv. The mother goes to the synagogue. The services echo faintly in a fenced, boarded-off women's gallery. There is crying by the elderly women. The young girls look at them as if they belong to a different century. Youth and the desire to live a full life shoot up violently in the young personalities. Outside the shuls, the young girls stay chattering. They walk away from the synagogue. They leave behind them the wailing of the older generation. They follow the urge for freedom and self-expression. Further and further from the shul they go. Further away to the dancing, tempting light of a fleeting joy. She says the women were abandoned. So she decided, this single girl, right, to start the Beis Yaakov movement. She was influenced by a Talmid of Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, right, the great. And what did she do? In 1917, she founded the first Beis Yaakov. She approached her brother to help support her. He said it would never catch on. He took her to the Belzer Rebbe in Marienbad, who just looked at her and said, Mazel ubracha, and she started it. When she passed away, there were 32,000 girls in the Beis Yaakov. Sarah Shanira changed the world. She saw a need, right? She didn't accept Chadash Asem and Atayra. She said, there's a need here. Let's meet it. There's a crying, yawning need. And she changed the world. She said, Yochel Nuchala, I can do it. And I think in the Parsha of Shelach, each one of us has to look at the fear that's preventing us from going to our promised land and saying, Yochel Nuchala, can we? You know, on my table in Shul in the summer, there's a young fellow, Sander Gerber. An amazing thing. He was on the board of AIPAC. And he was very involved politically. And through his political connections, he discovered something amazing. In the Palestinian bylaws, the laws of the Palestinian Authority, it's written in Shachar al-Gabi Love in black and white, if you kill a Jew, you get a stipend for the time you're in prison. If you kill 2 Jews, you get a 3-time stipend. If you 4, you get it 10 times, and the more Jews you kill, the greater is your stipend. Money received in part from the American government, which supports, it gives $500 million a year or so to support the Palestinian authorities. And he was outraged. He said, in this year, 2017 money to kill Jews? And he decided, one single guy, he sits in my shul, he's a Baal Tshuva, he has the most amazing, incredible family, envious of his family. He said, I will change this. I will attempt. He started lobbying members of the Senate and of Congress, going to the office. Imagine one person is going to make a difference. And this year, something called the Taylor Force Act is going to be introduced in Congress, and there's going to be a vote that the United States will suspend all $500 million of aid if the Palestinians do not stop funding terrorism. And the reason why I say this is, I think here is a current example. Sarah Shanira lived 100 and some odd years ago. She died around 100 in 1935, a little less than. But it's so far away from us. Here is somebody, he may daven in your shul too during the winter. And he said, I will change and I will say Yachal Nuchala. Let's go to this interview and let's be inspired by somebody who's saying, I can and I will not let obstacles, miraglim, the loy nuchals get in my way to reach an incredible goal. Let's be inspired by this. We have on the phone with us from New York, Sander Gerber. He's the CEO of Hudson Capital. He's also the former vice chair of the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars. He's a fellow of the Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs, and he also sits at my table by davening when he summers up in Wesley Hills. Welcome, Sander.
Well, thank you, Dovid, and great pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to the summer to hang out with you.
So, Sander, tell us about what you're working on, the Taylor Force Act. Most of our audience is not familiar. Give us a little bit of a synopsis of what you've done.
Well, there's a lot of people who have been working on it, but there's a really sad case. Of course, all victims of Palestinian terrorism are great tragedies. In this case, there was a graduate of West Point, actually captain of the ski team there, who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was walking down the boulevard between Yaffo and Tel Aviv, and he was stabbed to death by a Palestinian terrorist. No one else was killed. There were other wounded. Taylor was not Jewish. the Palestinian Authority held a wedding funeral for the Shahid, the murderer that they call a martyr. And on top of that, the martyr receives payments from the Palestinian Authority. This is all pursuant to law. It's quite remarkable. It's hard to comprehend that in today's world, particularly after the Shoah, there are actually laws to kill the Jews on the books of the Palestinian Authority, and no one knew about it. The laws don't just provide payments for the murderers, they also provide job placements. If they are lucky and go to prison, they get paid while they're in prison, and when they're released from prison, if they're served for 10 years or longer in jail, they're entitled to a new job within the Palestinian Authority at a senior level. If they're in jail for 5 years or more, they're entitled to a lifetime annuity. A woman only needs 2 years for a lifetime annuity. Turns out that Taylor Force's parents are Lindsey Graham's constituents. When Lindsey Graham heard about this, he turned red. And he immediately introduced the Taylor Force Act last year with co-sponsors Dan Coates, who's now the Director of National Intelligence, and Senator Roy Blunt. It's been reintroduced this year. So far, there's only one Democrat on board, Senator Manchin from West Virginia. The other Democrats are considering it, and they seem to be in favor of joining the bill. It's obviously a bipartisan issue. The issue the Democrats have is generally that they want peace, and they're worried that the Palestinian population, if we cut off all U.S. aid, that it might harm the population. They want to preserve certain aid programs that can help the Palestinian people. Now, of course, it's very difficult to monitor these aid programs and make sure no one's skimming off the top of these programs. This is the issues that Congress is working through. I expect it will be passed. I expect it will be passed the House and the Senate. It's really a question of time. The president now has gone on a peace.
Sander, what was your involvement? How did you get involved?
Well, at the Woodrow Wilson Center, we had an event, cause of the knifing in the Palestinian in Israel, end of 15, and all the panelists were blaming Israel. And I knew something about Palestinians being paid for violence, but I thought they were paid by Hamas. I thought they were paid by Iran. I didn't realize they were actually paid by the Palestinian Authority, but when I questioned why the Wilson Center had this, and I was very disturbed, and I said to the people, the program heads, don't you know that the terrorists are paid? That's a cause of the knifing? They weren't aware. And so I decided that I had to figure it out. I had to understand, how are these people being paid and how much are they being paid? So I called up the leading translators of Arabic media, Memory and Palestinian Media Watch, Yigal Carmon and Itamar Marcus, and I said to them, how are the terrorists paid? Who pays them? And they said, they're paid by the Palestinian Authority pursuant to law. So I said, get me the law. So they got me the law. And then I said, well, how much are they paid? And they said, well, there's a budget. I said, well, give me the budget. So first they got me the budget.
I imagine you were astonished, right?
It was beyond belief.
It was like all hiding in plain sight. Not
hiding. Open in Arabic. Open in Arabic. The budget for the prisoners, $140 million for 2016. Specified in the budget. Prisoners are not, it's not like they're maintaining jails. These are prisoners in Israeli prisons and payments to them. There are 440 full-time workers. And then I said, well, what about the budget for the martyrs? So then they looked through the budget, and, it's online, actually. And they got me the budget for the martyrs, $175 million.
The martyrs who are the martyrs?
The martyrs are the murderers that get killed.
So there's one budget for the suicide bombers, let's say, who get blown up, and there's another budget for the people who are in jail because they plotted, and this is on the budget of the Palestinian Authority, paid from the government proceeds.
Correct.
Sort of like
and a total for 2016, it was $315 million, about 8% of their budget. That's a big percentage of the budget. I don't know what U.S. defense spending is, but I don't think it's 8% of our budget.
And nobody had really spotted it before you shined the light on it?
I think people were aware of it. I think there was a question mark within certain segments of the Israeli military that maybe the Palestinian Authority should not be challenged in any way, that it's better to tolerate 50 Jews being knifed a year than wide-scale, larger-scale attacks.
So what did you do? What was your next step? I mean, I know Sander. To me, it's just like somebody who grew up in like Borough Park and Flatbush, deciding that you're going to make this international event to change the law in the United States, the law in Israel, the law. It's like I wouldn't know how to go about it. So how did you go about it?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to ask a Rav if I should insert myself in this, because there were some members of the Israeli security sector that thought that this trade-off was better, that, we should give up some neshamas up front to, guard against the danger of more widespread violence. And I couldn't really get a good answer to the shaila. So I decided that I just thought people should know about this. I thought there should be a light shined on it, so I endeavored to really put together the information in a coherent manner so that people could understand it. And I went and showed it to a lot of people. And one person in particular, General Elyashiv Stern in Israel, who's part of Yesh Atid, he saw it, and then he immediately introduced legislation in the Knesset, which just passed this week, to cut the Palestinian tax rebates based upon the amounts that they budget for the terror. That's actually a violation of the Paris Protocols under the Oslo Agreement, which is a very big deal for Israel to do, but they have now determined within the government conclusively that this practice is a red line. In other words, there are red lines for the Palestinian Authority. And I think that before, people thought there was some kind of payments that they thought were sort of more akin to welfare payments to the terrorists. But when they realized that these payments are actually graduated, so the more you slay, the more you get paid. It's an institutionalized pay-to-slay policy where you get paid more depending upon the level of violence you incur.
The more you kill, the more they pay you.
Yes.
So, Sander, what would be victory for you? What would be success?
Dovid, this is, we have to provide for secure Israel, and success would be the Palestinian Authority teaching their people that peace with Israel is in everyone's interest.
That's not going to happen. What would be legislative success for you?
David, you're a Democrat. Come on, you got to believe in this.
What do you want to accomplish? You would like to have the Taylor Force Act, which was introduced.
Obviously, the most important thing that your listeners can do is to call Senator Schumer, who understands the importance of this, and say, given the history of the Jewish people and the Shoah, it's intolerable to have laws to kill the Jews anywhere in the world. And what's especially an affront to the American taxpayer is that we're not just looking the other way, we're actually funding them. We are directly funding Palestinian terror. And if they could call Senator Schumer, who is really a linchpin for this, and ask him to sign on as quickly as he can, and I think he's amenable to it, but he needs people to tell him they care. And if he hears from enough people that they care, I think it can make a difference.
And if the Taylor Force Act passes, in effect, it would suspend all support of Palestinian Authority as long as they continue to pay stipends for martyrs and murderers of Jewish people.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Sander,
that's a high bar to ask for.
Sander, it's astonishing that a simple Yidela has gotten it this far. You've brought it to this, and I've seen it in all types of international press, and let's, anything we could do, let's try to push this over the finish line, right?
Well, one place that people can go to for more information is stopmoneyformurder.com. Stopmoneyformurder.com. It was actually created by the Christians United for Israel, who immediately understood the significance of this. And now there are many Jewish groups involved. The OU was the first to sign on with the Republican Jewish Coalition. The Yehudah has now signed on. The World Jewish Congress. The Conference of Presidents came out in favor of it. But, a lot of people still don't know what's going on. So if you go to Stop Money for Murder, you can see the actual legislation is on that website. And I think making people aware of the true narrative of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians would be very helpful to move us towards a resolution.
Thank you very much, Sander, for discussing this with us. Nice speaking to you. Each one of us can take a lesson. Where in our lives can we learn from these two people and say, Yachal Nuchal, we can, we will not be afraid. We were brought here for a destiny, for a reason, we can. Let's go to the phones to speak to our fabulous guest. We have on the phone with us from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Yisroel Barkin, who's the co-author of a sefer called Levush Ha'aron, and it is on Techeiles, our topic du jour. Welcome, Rabbi Barkin.
Hello, Shalom Aleichem.
Rabbi Barkin, could you give us the 5, 6, 7, 8, what you would believe are the most powerful rayas that the Techeiles from the Murex snail is indeed the correct Techeiles?
So, let's say we would start with Bavli. If you would start off in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, it speaks about Nebuzaradan, the general of Nebuchadnezzar, who came to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, that he left people after the Golos. He left people in Eretz Yisrael to catch chilazim in order to get them for the royal wardrobe of Nebuchadnezzar. And it says that he left those people to catch the chilazim in the northern parts of Eretz Yisrael, between Tzor, which is Tyre, and Haifa. So you see from there that the chilazim was something that was used for royal garments, as Rashi over there says, and it was something that was especially caught in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael, which is exactly the case with the Murex snail, which is caught in the northern parts of Eretz Yisrael, especially. Other places also, but that's a special place for catching it. It's more concentrated there. That's historically where it was caught, and it was used for royal clothing. Number 2 is later on in Masechta Shabbos, where the Gemara speaks about the malachas and where you learn them out from. There's on Daf Ayin Daled and Ayin Hey. There's 2 sugyas about the chilazim. So there's one Gemara about catching the chilazim, and it says there that you catch them with nets, which is the way that you would catch. We really should have stepped back. I think we'll get to that later, that the chilazim, the word chilazim means snail. That's just a dictionary translation of chilazim. We'll speak about it after, I guess, after the Gemaras. But if you go with that assumption, which I'll prove, I guess, in a few minutes. So the Gemara says about catching the chilazim, and Rashi says you catch it with nets. That's what you do with this murex snail. You don't usually catch snails with nets. But the murex snail, the way it eats is that it smells out meat, any meat, dead fish, that, you have them in a fish tank. You feed them pieces of chicken or meat. It will eat other, even living snails it will attack. So if you would put out a net, a flat net in the ocean and the seabed, then they'll come up over there, and they'll walk up onto that net, and they'll come to that meat, they'll congregate over there on top of the net, and you lift the net, and that will be a chiyuv tzeidah. The Gemara says later in the Ayin Hey, it's a chiyuv tzeidah, because it's tzad chilazim to catch a snail on Shabbos, even though it's slow moving, but you're catching something from deep in the ocean. There's a lot of work going into it, so it's for sure a chiyuv tzeidah. That's a separate discussion in itself. I don't know if we're going to get to that. But that Gemara is something that fits perfectly with the murex, the way that you're using nets to catch it, then there's going to be a chiyuv tzeidah because of that. That's number 2, I guess.
Okay, continue, number 3.
So we have number 3. It says, the Gemara speaks there, and that's Ayin Hey Amud Aleph in Shabbos. It speaks about breaking open the chilazim and which malachas you're over on. It says that there's a malacha of dosh, which is like extracting wheat from the shell. That's where one of the cases of the Yeshiva of dosh. It says that in the Mishkan, they did dosh when they cracked open the chilazim. So this murex snail also, you don't just squeeze out the blood, it's cracked open. The Rambam and Rambam discusses the cracking the chilazon to be like smashing it open, like smashing nuts.
It's also, I believe, the lashon of Rashi on in Shabbos on Daf Chavav. Rashi says paitzin es hachalazon. Paitzin means like, to crack it like you would a nut.
Yes, let me clarify something. That's a Rambam and Rambam that says it's like a nut. There are those that ask a kasha. They say that Rashi says petiyat chilazon. Look again at that Rashi.
She'aitzrin upaitzin es hachalazon lahaitzi damai. Because I'm reading the Paraklau Gadol. Yes, correct.
Okay, but there's another Rashi that's Ein Hey Amud Aleph that says petiyat chilazon. Rashi says doich kei biyadai kadeshi yete damai. That you squeeze it with your hand. So right. I quote you Rambam and Rambam. That's like smashing like a nut, and that's good with the murex. Rashi, first glance, someone who doesn't think too deeply would think that this Rashi is against the murex. And you'll see sometimes in like anti-murex publications, they make it like a big kasha. They discovered America, they found that this Rashi is against the murex. It really is not true. There's two reasons why it's not true. I'll give one reason is that first the Igli Tal already discussed this Rashi, and he has a long discussion, which I don't think it's time to get right into right now, but basically the Igli Tal says that you're cracking the shell in order to get to the worm that's inside after you break the worm open to get the blood out. So he says that Rashi holds that breaking the shell is not a melacha of dosh. He has a reason why not, because that's the first shell. You still have to do another stage of breaking, according to Rashi. So that's why Rashi only speaks about smashing the inside, the worm that's inside. So if you want to focus on Rashi, that's a more accurate description of Rashi, and Rashi also fits with the murex snail. Number 4 is that there's a whole discussion in the Gemara. The Gemara goes on more lengthy over there later on in the Ein Hey Amud Aleph. It speaks about the malach of killing the chilazon when you break it open. So it says this whole thing that when you smash it, it's for sure going to die. It's a psik reisha that's going to die. And it says that you don't want it to die, even though it's going to die. It's not something you want it to happen. You would rather it stay alive as much as possible because the dye content, the ink that's in it, is going to be less quality if the chilazon dies faster before you extract it. So that's also something that's complete correlation with the murex, because the murex is something that people that deal with it now see that, and it's documented in ancient writings of those that dealt with it, people that dealt with it 2,000 years ago and wrote books about it also. That it's something that you want it to stay alive. It's not good if the chilazon dies before you extract it.
It degrades the quality of the dye if it's not done immediately.
The dye also.
Not immediately.
The
that's number 4.
Into the snail. The dye could, besides for degrading the quality, it soaks into the snail, into the meat of the snail itself, and becomes lesser quality like that. You have to re-extract it, and it gets degraded like that.
What's raya number 5?
Number 5 is if we move out of Masechta Shabbos into Masechta Megillah, you see also over there Shevet Zvulun. There's a special connection between the chilazon and Shevet Zvulun. So it says that Shevet Zvulun had a special bracha for the chilazon. There's different ways to learn that Gemara. I'll start off with the way Rabbi Emdim learns that Gemara. He says that Shevet Zvulun had a tremendous. He says that Shevet Zvulun had a big space, had a big area. Real estate along the northern coast of Eretz Yisrael, and that's where the murex is found. Rabbi Emdim almost points directly to the murex. He doesn't call it by name over there, but he says that the Gemara Megillah speaks about Shevet Zvulun, and he says Zvulun had a nachala over there, and that's where this same snail, which is lengthily described in any ancient writings, in the Kaisvei Divrei Yomim, he says, I think, that they describe such a snail that he doesn't use the word snail there either. But he says they describe this, this bria.
Well, isn't it, Rabbi Barkin, isn't it a Rashi? It says, in the Berchas Moshe, it says, by Zvulun, Berchas Zvulun, it says, Usfune Tzmune Chayil, that hides in the sand. And I think it's either Rashi, one of the Mefarshim says that refers to the chilazon, Rashi on the spot. So it's obviously some creature that hides in the sand, which is exactly what this snail does, and it's on the shore, which is between Tyre and Haifa along Zvulun.
Get to hiding in the sand. Hiding in the sand was my next, after we finish the Gemaras and we go through Midrashim, I'm going to tell you more about hiding in the sand. So let's just put that off for a second. Once you mentioned Rashi, Rashi also says by Yaakov Avinu's brachos, L'chayv Yamim Yishkain, Rashi says that's where his nachla is. So Rashi seems, and there's a Taisus Rid in Bo Basra, also is pretty clear, and a lot of Mefarshim, the Radak in the Chumash, there's a little bit of Radak on Sefer Bereshis. It's not such a well-known Sefer. They seem to hold that Shevet Zvulun had a big chelek along the coast city, along the coast. They have a way to learn that up in Sefer Yeshua. The Psukim Sefer Yeshua are not very clear about where the Gvul is, but a lot of these Mefarshim hold like that. The Kapta Farach holds like that also, that Shevet Zvulun had a tremendous space along the ocean. Like we're saying that it's something that lives. You mentioned it hides in the sand. We'll get to that soon. Now there's another way to learn that Gemara also, because there's another school of thought, other Mefarshim, that seem to say that Zvulun only had a very small place by the ocean, not a big place like these Mefarshim. And they also have their rayas from Navi. Both Mefarshim have rayas. It's old machlokes gedolim Mefarshim. I wrote a whole article about it. A lot of Marmakaimis about it. Sometimes you have people speaking about it like there's only one Mahalach, and the way I learn Navi is that Mahalach, but really there's a big...
What's the next raya? So we have Sudei Tzmunechel, we have the Rashi Bezvul, and what's the next raya?
I was just going to finish up, just to quickly just touch up this raya, that according to the Tzad, that Zvulun did not have a big space by the shore. So Zvulun, with his little space by the shore, that was a space that was good for docking boats. That's what the bracha of Yaakov was, that he would get a good place, even a small place that's good for docking boats. And with docking boats, you go out with the boat and catch the chilos and catch the murex, because the murex, even though it's near the shore, but the ones right by the shore will get depleted pretty quick. And you can go out with boats to catch the ones that are... You go out with boats, like I said before, that you have nets to drop nets, so you need to go out with boats in order to drop those nets into the ocean. And that's...
Rabbi Barkin, what's the next raya?
Sure. Okay, so if you go on to Bava Metzia, Daf Samach Aleph on the base, the Gemara there says like a klala that Hashem is going to punish someone who puts Kla'ilon in his baguette and says that it's Techeiles. Kla'ilon, the Rishonim say, is indigo. So it means there's a punishment if someone puts indigo in his clothing and says that that's Techeiles. So he's faking. He's using something that's not really good for a mitzvah. If someone puts Kla'ilon in his baguette, it means that the guy is really doing a good job fooling, because Kla'ilon looks exactly like Techeiles. There's other rayas from the Gemara also that Kla'ilon looks exactly like... There's no way to tell the difference. The Gemara says you have to do special chemical tests to know the difference. So Kla'ilon is indigo, and this murex makes a color that's exactly the same color as the indigo.
Right, it's basically blue jeans. Indigo is what's used to color blue jeans, and Techeiles is the same color as basically blue jeans.
I've seen a piece of indigo dyed wool, and I looked at it for a long time next to a piece of Techeiles from the murex. It's the same exact color.
Yeah. And the Gemara also seems to imply that there is nothing else except for indigo that is the exact same color as. So when we find the snail and we say it's the exact color as indigo, the Gemara seems to imply that there is nothing else in the world that is the same exact color as indigo except for the chilazain.
Yeah, that's definitely the impression you get from learning the Gemara. That's for sure. There's rayas to that also.
From the Gemara Menachos too.
Yeah, so, right. And now I have to say a shtickle Torah to be mechadish now like that.
So being that we found something that's the exact same color as indigo, you would have to say that there's another bria that the Gemara did not know about, that also, by the way, lives off the shore of Israel, off the thing of hides in the sand, continue, go through all your eyes, and the Gemara did not know about it, and that's also the same color of indigo.
Right, you have one pasha and one pasal, and there's no mention in the Gemara. It's a very tremendous hamtzah. You have to be mechadish to be... What's
the next raya?
Okay, next raya is from... There's a Gemara in Yevamis also that speaks about Techeiles, that it goes onto wool, and it says that it's not kosher if you put Techeiles onto linen. Now the Gemara is not clear. It's clear in the Gemara that Techeiles would be able to go onto linen just as possible, but I'm just going to jump over to the Sefer HaChinuch that he seems to understand from that Gemara. It's not really clear in that Gemara, but the Sefer HaChinuch seems to understand from there that even though Techeiles goes into linen, it doesn't work as good in linen. The dye doesn't come out as good. So that's something also they have in the murex dye. That's not the strongest raya in the world, because there's a lot of other dyes also that work better in wool than linen. But that is a correlation, Im calls that.
Okay.
That the murex sign that goes into wool, it goes into linen, but it works better in wool than in linen. Those are the facts.
Okay.
It was tried and tested. It works in linen, but doesn't work as good. Before the experiments were made, there were different rumors about it. But
okay, what's your next raya?
When you go to Sanhedrin, the Gemara speaks about Chiladins on the mountain, and a rainy day. So over there's actually a machlokes. Rashi says it's about the chilazon of Techeiles that climbs up onto the mountain on a rainy day and lays eggs over there. So that's actually something that you don't have in the murex. No one saw it climbing up onto the mountain. So, some people use that Rashi as a question on the murex. But really you have to look at other Rishonim, the Yad Ramah, and there's rayas from a lot of other Rishonim. There's rayas from the Aruch, and there's rayas from Taisus and the Ritva. It's a big discussion. I don't think the whole in-depth discussion is for now. But most Rishonim understand that Gemara is talking about the general species of snails, that they come up on a rainy day. When it's a rainy day on the mountain, then snails appear. So from that Gemara, you see the idea that chilazon, the English translation word for chilazon is snails, which is something I'm going to get to later. So that's another raya.
In other words, basically the raya is that the chilazon seems to be both a shore and not a shore, that nin. And there's not a lot of different types of brias. There are not that many creatures that have one part of the family lives ashore and one part of it doesn't live ashore.
And the ones that live ashore are the ones that appear in rainy days.
And the snail is one of those creatures which there's, anybody who's had a tomato garden knows that the snails come and are eating up all your plants. And the same thing, there are snails and shells that live in the water as well. So the Gemara refers to chilazon, that type of creature. The chilazon comes from a min that is clearly a snail. It lives both on the shore and off the shore.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the next raya. What's the next?
Min, I'll jump to Masechta Avodah Zarah, where the Gemara speaks about a kind of refuah for a certain sickness, and it says that you use some kind of chilazon, meshakti chulzoni. So over there also, the way Rashi explains it in Allah's word, is that it's a limtza, which is very evident from many places in Rashi that it's a snail. Rashi
Old French.
Yeah, Rashi says min chilazon. It's a type of, Rashi means to say there, min chilazon.
Okay.
Snail.
What's your next raya?
All kinds of snails, like I'm saying. So over there is also a type of snail, just like the Gemara in Sanhedrin, according to most Rishonim. Of course, not like Rashi in Sanhedrin, but we're naturally following.
What is your next raya, Rabbi Barkin?
Yeah. So in Menachos and Daf Mem Daled Amud, there's a short description of what the chilazon looks like. So if you look at that brayso and you examine it properly, then it's a very clear description of the murex. Sometimes people think that it doesn't fit so well with the murex, that brayso. It's only because of people didn't examine the brayso and understand it in context properly.
It's daimel yam. So we say the Gemara.
Yeah, it says Tanur Abanon, chilazon zeh, gufay daimel yam, ubriyasa daimel dag, va'ila achas l'shivim shana, ubidamay tzayvim Techeiles, l'fikach dama v'yikarim. So there are about 5 phrases there, if I counted right. First thing is chilazon zeh, this chilazon. So chilazon is something that I hope we'll get to later. Is something that could be clearly proven that the dictionary translation of chilazon means snail. Even if it means other similar species to snails, but it for sure includes snail. Gufay daimel yam, ubriyasa daimel dag. Then it gives 2 descriptions of the chilazons, of the chilazon itself. The rest of it is like things that it does. The 2 descriptions the brayso gives of the chilazon itself is that its body is similar to the sea, and its briyasa, which means its form. Rashi says there, tavnis dioknai. Tavnis dioknai is like tavnis kalash or b'mayim. Tavnis is a shape. So its shape, its look, tavnis dioknai, its shape is like a fish. So gufa demliya means that its body looks like the ocean, which is what you see in the murex. Anyone who went diving for the murex, these places I've been there in Eretz Yisrael, you could go catch them fresh.
They're very hard to see. They blend into the water.
Blend into the water.
Exactly.
They blend into the water. Like the yam. The yam is a seabed.
Good camouflage.
The word yam means a seabed. The Ramban says that. The
right.
first time the Torah uses the word yam, you can look in the Ramban there, and it's one of the first took him. The Ramban says that the word yam means seabed. Every time yam means the water of the sea, it's always a borrowed term. So it looks like the seabed. It camouflages in. This camouflage is a real part of the life of the chilazon. The camouflage stuff that goes in. You can't get it off. I once went into Eretz Yisrael. I caught a chilazon. I went with the group that caught a chilazon. Actually, I didn't do it myself. And I went and tried to brush off the stuff with a brush with metal bristles. It reminded me of the Masrekas for Barzal. And I rub and rub and rub. It doesn't come off. The coating doesn't come off. All you do is you take off the outer coating, and the inner coating is still there. The inner coating doesn't come off. The inner coating is greenish, aquamarine, turquoise-ish. So, this cover, besides blending into the seabed, it also has many times this greenish shade, which also looks like the top of the yam, which the yam is blue-green. So in Daimel Yam, the two meanings of Daimel Yam, the seabed and the sea, they both happen with the murex.
What does it mean, Gufay Daimel Adag?
So it says Briosa Daimel Adag. Gufa Daimel Yam, Briosa Daimel Adag. Briosa, Rashi says, that means the shape is like a fish, which is an extremely obvious thing that you could see. Many people notice this right away. Kids, old people, men, women, Rabbanim, simple people, is that the shape of the murex snail. If you just put the snail down on the table, it looks like a fish. It looks like a regular fish.
Okay.
The fact that it
says.
I'll just say one more thing. The fact that it's Briosa Daimel Adag means that it's not a simple fish like every regular fish that swims around. It's something else.
Daimel Adag. It's similar to
a dag. Yeah. But it could be
called
dag also because it's a sea creature. But Daimel Adag means more like a specific type of dag. Which.
Okay. Let's continue. Yeah.
Okay. Then it says it says So it says so you have to look at Rashi there, and it's clear from Rashi and many other places also that when it says it's giving a description of why it's expensive. It's not coming there to describe to you how to find the chilot or something like that, which is a whole right that this Bryce is trying to show you certain things about the chilot. It's not a search guide to help you find it. There are those that learn this Bryce as a search guide. If someone wants to find the chilot, it's used as a search guide. It's not a search guide. It's telling you certain things that you have to know about it.
Okay, continue.
So that's the reason why it's expensive. Is another thing that you have to know about is because it comes once in every 70 years. Comes up once in every 70 years means that it's something that's caught in the ocean. Once every 70 years is a figurative way of saying once in a lifetime. There's many rayas from Chazal that Shivim Shana is used in Chazal's terminology as once in a lifetime, because Shivim Shana is an example of a lifetime, right? You may say no.
It's expensive and hard to get a hold of. That's the bottom line.
Right. So it's
some of Yikarim, and it is very expensive till today. I understand, right?
But it's not nearly as expensive as it used to be. I'm going to tell you why. Because the reason why it used to be expensive is because it was deep in the ocean. Eilach Shemshana means that it's only once in a lifetime thing that would come up in a freak accident, in a hurricane or something. But the normal way of catching it would be to go down into the ocean, like Rashi said, that you go out in boats and lay nets. So that's a very expensive thing to do in those days without any modern equipment. And these boats could flip over, people could die from it. It's documented about this, that people were going to the Great Sakana, catching the murex in those days. So in those days, it would be 10 times more expensive than these days. These days, you could buy Techeiles for $70, $80, $90, $60 even. In those days, it would be much, much more expensive. It was compared to gold, or more expensive than gold. All because of this, because the great effort and danger of going down to the ocean, because it only comes up once in a lifetime. That's right. Exactly what Elyashiv Shana means, and how Rashi explains it. That's the reason why it's expensive. And then the last thing the Bryce says is Techeiles, which is very straightforward. It's something that you color Techeiles with it, which is exactly what the murex does. The murex is something that colors Techeiles with it. There's no other sea creature in the world that could color Techeiles, and even more, there's no sea creature in the world that was used the cloud for any kind of color. It's only the murex family that is used for color, and it could be made Techeiles out of. So that's the Brisa in a nutshell. And it's
okay. What are your next rayas? Bring a few more.
Yeah.
Give us, Rabbi Barkin, how many more rayas do you have?
I would go to a little bit to Yerushalayim and Midrashim now, if there's time. I would go to one famous Medrash. Just to prove that the word chilazon means a snail, is because the Medrash describes the clothing.
Artika gadolimai.
Artika gadolimai. It says just like a chilazon has an artika gadolimai, also their clothing grew with them. So chilazon there is a regular word of something that's well known, a snail, which its clothes grow with it. There's a chorinim that speak this out. As Rabbi Yosef says that you see from this Medrash that means a snail.
You're saying this is the Medrash in Shir Hashirim, Perik Daled. Seyu lemad min achalozein shekolzman shu gadol nartikoi gadol imai.
Nartikoi gadol imai, right? It's quoted in Roshim, and the Rosh brings the Medrash Beisa gadol imai. Its house grows with it, or other places.
So if you say nartika gadol imai, Beisa gadol imai, it has to be a snail, right?
Yeah, so it could be a turtle also, but it can't be a turtle because 5 Rishonim say the chilazon is a telas. I could get that later. There's 5 Rishonim that say clear describe it as telas, as a worm. So if you put together a worm with something that shell grows with it, then you're left with a snail. linguistically also, it's known Arabic word. It's the Middle Eastern languages. There's a modern language, Syriac, that's almost a duplicate of the Aramaic and the Gemara. And the Chazuna means snail there.
Okay, continue. Give it.
Snails, but
Rabbi Barkin, how many more rayas do you have?
I'm going to quote you another medrash about Suni Tumunei Chol you mentioned before that varies in the ocean. So there's a medrash Lekach Toiv that it's from the Yerushalayim. I think he's quoting the Joshim, that he makes it so clear, so vividly the way he describes it. He says, Suni Tumunei Chol Zach Ilazim Shasofon Vitamin B'Chol. He uses two lashonos. It's totally hidden in the ocean. The murex is something not only goes a little bit
in the sand.
And right, the murex, it goes totally in. My friend has a fish tank with live chilazon in Lakewood. I bought it from Eretz Yisrael once, and it's still alive. And he lost the chilazon. He didn't know where it was, and he emptied out his whole thing. And finally, he realized it buried itself totally into the sand. It buried itself.
Wow.
It's Tofim V'Tamin B'Chol. It's exactly.
Okay.
There's another medrash that Rishonim quote that they say that Yaakov Avinu sent to Yosef. When they didn't know who he was yet, they said, "Chumi zimmer sa'aretz," bring the things that they bring the very
light, shkedim, etc. Yeah.
So about the shkedim, right? So zimmer sa'aretz, the Medrash says, is the chilazon. You see also that the chilazon was like a well-known, important thing in the world in those days, which is exactly the murex, which was a well-known, important thing in those days. But the Rishonim bring a alternative, a variable nusach of the Medrash that adds another few words. It says, chilazon is tzayvim mimenu kamet tzvarim. It's a chilazon that you can make many colors out of it, which is exactly the murex. Everyone knows that reads about the murex knows that it doesn't just make blue. It makes blue, it makes purple, it can make reddish, violet. So, of course, Techeiles is blue, and you use the blue from it, which is very simple to make blue from it. But it's something that can make many colors out of it, and that's the way the Medrash describes it. Chilazon is tzayvim mimenu kamet tzvarim.
Okay, continue.
So that's in a nutshell the rayas like that I would bring up from Chazal. There's one more thing I forgot. There's Yerushalmi that has a discussion about if chilazon has gidim v'atzamas, if it has bones and tendons, sinews or not. So it has a whole discussion. Does it have and doesn't or does not have bones? And then there's a child in the Farshim how to learn the maskana of the Yerushalmi. There's a raya from the Ramban that the maskana of the Yerushalmi says it does have bones. What's the whole question? Everyone knows what a chilazon is in the time of the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi is having a discussion, does it have bones or does it not have bones? Take a look. It tries to prove different raya, like from the length of its lifespan, if it has bones. When the chilazon is a snail, then it's extremely posh what it means, because a snail doesn't have bones, but it has a big huge bone outside of it. It has this shell. So the question is this considered a bone or not? It has also like small gidim. You could see pictures of them. It has, but not the regular heavy gidim that you have in a cow that you use to sew your tefillin. So that's exactly why the Yerushalmi has a whole discussion. Does it have bones or does it not have bones? Does it have gidim or does it not have gidim? Because it's a snail, and the snail you have to know how to describe it. Is this outer shell considered a bone of it or not?
Okay, tell us what other rayas. Give us your next three, not Chazal rayas. Give us three more rayas, because we'll be on, I think you have 100 rayas. Let's do the next three, and give us your three best rayas.
Not Chazal rayas is that just like historically, this was just such a well-known thing that was used in ancient days, and it's documented in outside books also. Is Aristotle, is other books that document things. To document things I mentioned before, Yaakov Emden refers to these books, and they talk about this royal color that was so coveted. And all the colors they mention also, like I said, there's all different colors you can make from it, and it was something that the Roman emperors made a gzeira against it. And this it's the only thing that they mention to be a color that comes from the ocean, a coloring thing comes from the ocean. So that fits very good with the chilazon, which you find in Chazal and in Psukim also, which was a well-known thing. It's something that kings used. Achashverosh, he would go with Techeiles. It says that what's his name? It says, and I quoted before, Rashi says about Nebuchadnezzar wanting Techeiles. It says about Chirum al Tzar and Psukim in Yechezkel, it's Psukim in Yirmiyah. It's Psukim all over. Techeiles is such a big, important thing known in the world, and that's something that you find in all these books. It's archaeologically found. Piles and piles, millions of those shells are found in the exact same place, in the Tsar and the Phoenician kingdom, the ancient Phoenician kingdom, and that's what you find in the Gemara, that they use Chilazim to me. So was it Sarvad Chayfa. Kafter Farach in that Gemara says it's talking about Chilazim of Techeiles.
Okay, what other rayas do you have?
So you could prove also, you could support, at least, some of these rayas aren't self-proving by themselves, but another support comes in. If you look historically at the timeline when Chilazim use and Techeiles use went away from us. So if you look at, it was well used in time of the Beis Hamikdash. Obviously, they made big kuna from it. In time of the Gemara, you see that there's different Gemaras. You see that it says that they didn't use it that much because there's Gemaras that they only brought it in from some other place at a certain time later on. In time of the Yerushalayim, they didn't have Techeiles at all, and it was lost right from time of the Geonim. The Ramban says, "B'mois Geonim they didn't have Techeiles." So what happened over there? That from time of the Beis Hamikdash they had it, and right after the Beis Hamikdash in time of Tanaim, I didn't tell you yet. So in time of Tanaim, did they have it or not? So there's a raya from the Sifri. The Sifri says in the time of Rabbi Yisroel, who was like 50, 80 years after the Churban, it says that it was found a little bit. There was a Zokin that was able to catch it, but he said that it was Gonas, it was Mignaz, so it was hard to get it, but he was getting it. So what happened to Sifri? He was getting it. He wasn't getting it at the same time. That's all because of the Gzeres of the Romans, because this is documented also in Roman archives, which are accessible these days, that emperors, starting from the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and made progressively stronger Gzeres, which went stronger and stronger until the time of the end of the time of the Gemara, and time the Geonim was all over. That their grip became stronger and stronger on Eretz Yisrael, and that's why the Talmid Yerushalayim was nechtam earlier also, and that's why the Kiddush HaChodesh stopped then also in the middle of the time of the Gemara. It's all because of what the Romans Gzeres in Eretz Yisrael, where they called it Techeiles. So two things happened. First of all, the Roman Gzeres became stronger and stronger from the time of the Churban and on, and also their control over Eretz Yisrael and their redifus got worse and worse, exactly until the middle and end time of the Talmud Bavli era. And that's exactly where you see the Techeiles disappearing. The Techeiles is totally disappeared by the time of the Geonim. The Ramban says in time of the Geonim, there's no more Techeiles. In time of the Gemara, you see it being hard. In time of the Tanaim, you see it being hard. I would throw in something that this is a very good pshat in Arizal. Arizal says there's only Techeiles in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Some people come to you saying, how can you wear Techeiles? Arizal says only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So, time after the Beis Hamikdash also. So what's Arizal saying? You have to understand Arizal before you ask questions. Sometimes people like to ask questions without knowing what they're asking from. But you have to understand. Now, with the Metzias of the Murex, that Arizal is very understood, because it was just exactly at that time in the Beis Hamikdash. That was documented in Roman records. It was just that time when the Gzeres started, and they got worse and worse. So in time of the Beis Hamikdash, there was always Techeiles. After the time of the Churban, then it became more and more limited. It wasn't always available. That's why the Arizal says it's only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that historically they say off the shore of Haifa, they found mounds of the murex that's like, they say 100 meters long and 50, basically the size of a football field, 3 or 4 meters deep, 10 feet deep, all split in the exact place to take out the blue gland. And so obviously over hundreds or maybe thousands of years in that exact yard, by the Chelke of Zvulun, in the ocean, in the Chayil, they found which were obviously mined there by prior generations. Would that be something that you would think is a raya?
It helps you build up the case to understand the Metzias. That itself, just finding these cells, not a raya, doesn't say this is Techeiles, but when you understand the historical background of the chashivas of the snail, then it builds up the case tremendously, because you have to look at everything in perspective. You have to
now, what do you say to this? You didn't mention something, or maybe it's not a chazal or anything, but that they have found in Masada Techeiles, and they did a DNA test on it. You could Google this, and the DNA shows that it comes from the murex snail, which means around 2,000 years ago, or that's basically the Zman when Masada was destroyed right after the Churban. the Techeiles they used then was clearly from the Murex snail in Masada. Now, Rabbi Bleich, when I mentioned this to him, he said, well, the people in Masada weren't necessarily, the same religious that we were. So you would have to say that as part, all the Sifrei Torah, the Chalakim of the Sifrei Torah they found in Masada are identical to what we have. So you would say that...
Can I clear something up right now?
Yes.
The thing in Masada was not Techeiles and tzitzis at all. I did not bring that for a support.
No, it was not tzitzis, but they were using the color Techeiles.
To show that it was used. It was a slightly violet.
So we would have to have. We would say that they used that Techeiles and the Murex.
It was used in the world in that time. We knew that without Masada.
And it was used on clothing in Hebrew in Israel. So you would have to say that there must be a different color, the exact same thing, which is Neged the Gemara in Menachos, that was punkt being used in Masada, but that is not the genuine Techeiles. Just a startling coincidence.
The point is that all these colors were being used in Eretz Yisrael at the same time, and they were being dyed in the same place. And in Chazal, you just find down the word chilazon, which just means snail, and snail used for Techeiles. The Tosefta says, how do you make Techeiles? Min chilazon. How do you not make Techeiles? What's bad Techeiles? Shloim min chilazon. It's not from chilazon.
So Rabbi Barkin,
how religious they were. So the point is just that this thing was used.
Was what they used.
There was another thing found in different archaeological places in the Qumran caves, and though that thing is more bluish. The one in Masada happens to be slightly violet. It's not a pure blue. There was the New York Times published it, and they doctored up the colors. It's slightly violet, which also shows that it was used, but it's not a pure blue. There was later they published. It was discovered earlier, something from the sea caves. There's no remnants of violet at all. It's greenish bluish. So either way, the snail is for sure used.
So do you have any other, Rabbi Barkin, in closing? Could you give us any other rayas?
That was the basic thing. I can't think offhand. There's much more to say. Nothing's coming to me right second. But
archaeologically, biologically, and its comparison. Well, so can I ask you a question?
Correlation with the Rishonim, if you want to hear quotes from the Rishonim, that things that the Rishonim that fit with the Chilazon.
Which is what?
But if we would go through the whole corpus of Rishonim writings and how it fits with the Chilazon, that could be a whole separate discussion. But there's some things that are really striking.
Like, for example, give us one.
The Taisus says Rabbeinu Tam said that the blood of Chilazon is a mitgad pocket. It's an enclosed thing in itself. It stays by itself. It's not the lifeblood, and that's what you have with the murex. It's a special dye pouch. It's not part of the lifeblood of the chilazon. You have Rishonim, 5 Rishonim that call it the Techeiles. You have Rashi, the Rash Mishans, the Raiver, the Rav Yah, Rav Nosson Yeshiva, 5 Rishonim that call it what a snail is. A snail has a worm inside it. You can open up the murex and see the worm that's hiding inside it. You have Rishonim that say. You have Rishonim that says that Rashi that speaks about how it was a royal thing that the Nebuchadnezzar would have wanted. You have a Rashi that gives a last word for the word chilazon. I mentioned before limtza, which is very clear from Rashi uses that word many times, and Rashi clearly uses that word as an old French word for snail.
So Rabbi Barkin, do you wear Techeiles?
Yes.
Yeah, so do I. And which ones do you wear? Do you wear the 2-string, the 1-string like the Rambam, the 2-string, or the 4-string, which is Taisvis?
Well, I do like the psak of my uncle Rabowski Zatzal that he did by himself, and that's how he always paskin for all his Talmidim, and anyone who asked him to do
Which is what?
Taisvis, which is 2 strings. That's what it says in the Mishnah Berurah. And then 2
strings doubled over, which is 4 strings.
Doubled over, which is 4.
Yeah, that's how the Mishnah Berurah brings it. Yeah.
About 25 Rishonim that say like that or more.
Yeah.
So there's some other opinions around also, but that's mainstream in the Paiskim to go with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for clarifying this and for all the work you've done on behalf of being Megal of the mitzvah of Techeiles.
Okay, thank you. That's
We have the honor of having with us on the phone Hagoyin Rav Yehudah Dovid Bleich, who's the Marad Asra of Kehilas Beis Yehudah, Bnei Yehudah. He's also Rosh Yeshiva by Yeshiva's Rabbi Yisroel Barkin. He's a Musmach by the Rosh Kebahagra Moshe Feinstein, and he's one of the few people in the world who could say that Rav Moshe referred to them as Yedidi. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Bleich.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Rav Bleich, I learned the sugya of Techeiles. We get a lot of people who are interested in it. And it seems that there are so many compelling rayas, both from psukim, from Chazal, from history, from archaeology, etc. Now DNA testing. It seems like it's an aveira. It's a bittul asay biyadayim not to wear it, and in particular because most poskim them on that wearing. Even though it says halavan ein makavis at Techeiles, but Techeiles ein makavis halavan, it's like tefillin shel yad is not makav shel rosh, but you still who would just wear shel rosh and not wear shel yad. So why aren't we makbid to wear the new Techeiles? If we could be mekayim a mitzvah that for well over 1,000 years was lost, we spend so much time looking for the lulav and the esrig that it's one day you mekayim a deraisa. Here, a person could be mekayim 12 hours a day, some days 15 hours, 365 days a year. Such a beautiful mitzvah. The Torah says it's shakel keneged kala Torah kula as a chazal. Why aren't we do it kirai?
We absolutely should, if we knew what the Techeiles was. The only response is, number one, well, first of all, the caveat. I'm certainly not an expert in Techeiles. I have read the literature, particularly the scientific literature with regard to the so-called royal purple. But at the end of the day, the response to your question is really a very simple one. And it's the same response that was given when there was much less scientific evidence that could be brought to bear, but nothing has really changed. And that's the response of the Beis Halevi. The response of the Beis Halevi is that without a Mesorah, without a valid tradition from generation to generation, we don't know very much of anything. The wearing, I don't want to be emphatic or overly strong in my language, but the acceptance of the so-called scientific evidence, and I'll try to explain in a moment, there's really no scientific evidence, but the so-called scientific evidence is not confirmed in any way by our Mesorah. We don't have a tradition. There are many things that we couldn't possibly know without a Mesorah. There's no way to be mekayim any mitzvah, to fulfill a mitzvah, unless you understand the parameters of the mitzvah, and that involves understanding precisely what it is that the Torah is commanding. I haven't seen it any place, but we have a posuk, Shal avicha v'yagedecha zekenecha v'yemrulach. Zekenecha v'yemrulach, I understand. Zokin is shekol chochma. You have to ask the Chachamim of his generation if you have any question halacha. V'yemrulach, they'll tell you what halacha is. The Shal avicha v'yagedecha seems to be superfluous. What is there to ask the father? You want no halacha? Ask the Rav, ask the Chacham. What's the Shal avicha? And I think the answer is really simple. Before you deal with shalos of halacha, you have to know what it is that you're talking about. And what it is that you're talking about doesn't involve halacha. It involves empirical reality. And we don't know the world, the reality of the world, as it relates to mitzvahs without a Mesorah. The father is the person who bears the Mesorah with regard to the mitzvahs, the meaning of words, the meaning of concepts, and then you have to ask the halacha. I remember even as a child learning Chumash, you take out an English translation, and we come to the parsha of the birds that are tamei. You have a whole list of translations, and Chazal tell us that we don't know what these species are. The authors of the King James translation seem to have thought that they knew what those birds were. I haven't the vaguest idea what those birds were, because my Chumash Malamed didn't know what those birds were. I remember very well as a child. I couldn't have been very old. I remember my father, Zecharna Levrocha, Friday night at the table. My mother had made pigeon for Shabbos, and pigeon, it's a yena. It's certainly a iftar. And I remember my father looking at me and saying, a pigeon is a kosher bird. You should know, a pigeon is a kosher bird. It didn't take me very long to realize that, in effect, this is Shalot Yichov Yagedecha. He's passing on the Messiah to the next generation. We don't eat pigeons anymore. I have to make a point of telling my children and grandchildren that a pigeon is an iftar, and if you'll bring me one, I'll be delighted to eat it. If I didn't tell it to them, how in the world would they know that a pigeon is an iftar? They never saw a pigeon on a table in a Jewish home. So the way we have a Messiah is Rabbi Hatzayid, I had a hunter who was my teacher. He taught me hunting. He told me which is an iftar, which is not an iftar. Without a Messiah, I wouldn't know how to translate the word.
And yet, we eat turkey, right?
Oh.
Because we're saimach on. Except there are a few rabbanim in the world who don't eat turkey. Rav Yankiv didn't eat turkey. His Einikoch didn't eat turkey. But the Roiv Klal Yisrael, because we're saimach on the simonim of the Shulchan Aruch, even though there's no Messiah on it.
The Darkei Tshuva indicates that there is a Mishpoch Yehudah Berussia that they wrote into the Tnoim or the Ksuba that the daughters-in-law wouldn't be Michael, their sons and grandsons, they wouldn't be Michael them the turkey. Right. Now, the turkey is kind of an anomaly. We basically don't eat anything without a Messiah, and that's relatively late in history. And that's because Chazal gave us simonim of an iftar. There's an alternative way of knowing what's an iftar. For reasons that we don't have to go into now, the Ramah records l'halacha that we no longer rely on the simonim of Chazal, and we eat those birds only on the basis of a Messiah. And you're absolutely right. We have no Messiah whatsoever for a turkey. The turkey is indigenous to the North American continent, and before Columbus, they couldn't have had them in Europe. The Achronim say that we eat the turkey despite the fact it doesn't have a Messiah, because it was nispashet in Europe, la'alofim u'lerevovos, that we saw, and not a single one of them was Deirus V'Eichel. They had all of the simonim of Chazal, and in effect, the acceptance of turkey predates the Ramah, or at least predates the dissemination of the Ramah, of the Shulchan Aruch with the Hagos of the Ramah. So there you're dealing with the simonim. These birds have the simonim of a iftar. It's clear that beginning with the Ramah, there were chayshish that I may just not see that this animal is a deirus v'eichel, that it does whatever it is that a non-kosher animal does with its prey. The fact that I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
But there are more rayas, Rabbi, that this is the real Techeiles. There are 10 times as many rayas than that the turkey is kosher. So I put it that people who don't eat turkey shouldn't wear Techeiles.
And people who eat turkey, I don't know if they should be wearing it either. The mechayis is the fact that they eat turkey is not mechayis.
So let me ask you a little different. It seems that the rayas are very compelling. Even if you feel the rayas are not compelling, people they take an esrig, they take 3 esrogim. Maybe this one's kosher, maybe this one isn't. Maybe this lulav is the right lulav. Maybe this. I had an uncle, Shimon Ludmir Zechayel Lavrach. He said you used to come every year to buy the esrogim by him, and he used to tell me how you were mahadeh with the esrogim, the way you did your esrogim. So I ask you, if people are so medagdik with every possible chumrah and a mitzvah that's once a year, right? They chazenish. Maybe it's not a chazenish. Maybe this is a Greek a yanava. They shackle with 4 esrogim. Because maybe this is a murkiv, maybe this is a muyuchis, maybe. So why don't we? Where did Techeiles also take it also suffix? Like, well, you could be Mekayim your whole life, 365 days, 12 hours a day, a mitzvah deraisa. The rayas aren't 100%; they're 80%. What's the downside of it?
The comparison isn't a very good comparison, as the Beis Halevi indicated very well. And that's because, with terms of an esrog, we have a Messiah with regard to what is an esrog. Not that those things haven't been questioned by some people. There was a chief rabbi in South Africa. His name was Louis Rabinowitz. He seems to have been very interested in what he called the flora and fauna of Torah, and there was a column that appeared every Friday, every Erev Shabbos in the Jerusalem Post, in which he wrote something about flowers, vegetables, fruits that are described in Tanakh. And one column that made an impression on me, not necessarily Lutov, was his argument that people here are so being so mahader in not using an esrog amurkiv. All of our esrogim are mukovim. Why are they mukovim? Because the bees cross-pollinate, and who knows where they're bringing the pollen from. Of course, there is a problem with esrog amurkiv, and the point that he raised is certainly a point. And the only response to the point is that in a certain sense, the bee is the Baal HaMesirah. The bee tells me what's an esrog. If the bee has pollinated an esrog tree, the fruit of the esrog tree is a yotze. It's a yotze min esrog, and it has a din of an esrog. It's when humans begin to intervene in what is an unnatural way that we have a tampering with the esrog that was declared to be the pre Yehudah of Chumash. We know what an esrog is only because we have a Messiah. The Torah doesn't tell us what an esrog is. The fruit of a beautiful tree, or the beautiful fruit of a tree, whatever pre Yehudah means, but it's not identified in Chumash. Without Torah Shebal Peh, it's impossible to understand Torah Shebeksav at all. That's the well-known anecdote in the Gemara. The ger who came to Shammai and said, "Teach me Torah Shebeksav. Torah Shebeksav, I believe you. Torah Shebal Peh, I don't believe you." And Shammai tells him to go find somebody else. So he goes and he finds Hillel. And Hillel tells him, he begins Aleph Beis Gimel, and the next day he comes back for the second shiur, and he tells him Tov Shin Reish Kuf. He tells him exactly the reverse. And this prospective ger was no fool. He knows he told him exactly the opposite yesterday. To which Hillel tells him that if you rely on me for Torah Shebeksav, you'll have to rely on me for Torah Shebal Peh as well, because if I didn't tell you what's an Aleph, you wouldn't know what an Aleph is. If I didn't tell you that an Aleph is an Aleph, you tell me that Tov is an Aleph. And that's just not a matter of how to vocalize or to read the letters. There are halachas that are dependent upon the letters and the numerical value associated with the letter. There is no Torah Shebeksav without a Torah Shebal Peh. And the Torah Shebal Peh is a Messiah. That's precisely what the Beis Halevi meant. So what the Beis Halevi meant was that without a Messiah, I don't even have a Sofik. Where I have no Messiah, I am, if you'll pardon the term, an agnostic. There was a professor of biology in Bar Ilan who he was very, very adamant that what we call rye is not one of the Minei Dogon at all. That it's something else. It's not one of the grains of Chazal. I know that you make a Meitzah Lechem Minoris on rye, and that you have to bench after you eat rye bread, because that's what my father showed me. Or better, that's what my grandmother showed me. In the kitchen, she was the Balas HaMesirah. We have a Mesirah that is part of the Minei Dogon. There was a very serious shaila this year. I consider it to be a serious shaila. There are some people who are gluten intolerant, and apparently even spelt and oats isn't proper for their diet. And they were using some kind of heirloom grain that was an ancient species of wheat. The wheat that we use today is probably not exactly the same as the wheat of the time of Chumash, or even the wheat of Chazal. The scientists will tell you that there are all kinds of different wheats. These are what they call heirloom wheats, and there are people who specialize in this. There's a bakery in my neighborhood that produces bread made of those wheats. And the shaila was whether you could bake matzahs And their issue was primarily that we don't have a Messiah. There, the question, at least in my opinion, hinged to a great extent upon DNA evidence. If the DNA is close enough so that there is enough of the same DNA in our strain of wheat as there is in this alleged ancient form of wheat, then it's presumably the same mean. And that goes to the issue of DNA evidence. DNA evidence may be significant as far as halach is concerned, and that takes us a little bit afield from the topic that we're talking about now. Halacha generally does not accept circumstantial evidence. There are exceptions. The exception is the cases in Shuas, where the circumstantial evidence in effect is deductive. If you have two people who enter a cave and you're sure that there's no means of egress, and you saw that nobody else entered, and one is lying on the floor with a stab wound in his back, and the other one is holding a dripping sword, and it could not have been a self-inflicted wound, this is evidence that Bezdin can accept. And the reason is because it's deductive. We're not chayshish for ma'aseh nisim. We don't consider that somebody might have been able to pierce rock and enter. But derech hateva, in terms of the natural laws of the universe, this can't happen. The only possible conclusion, logically, is that this person is the murderer and this is his victim. Other forms of evidence, like fingerprint evidence, is nothing more than an empirical generalization. Anyone who knows anything about philosophy of science will tell you that most of science is based upon hypotheses that are derived from empirical generalizations. There is no logical reason why the law of gravity should be a universal principle in the universe. Newton's notion that bodies possessing mass exercise a gravitational pull in direct correlation to the square of the mass is something that was discovered only on the basis of what in simple language is called trial and error. To put it in simple language, Newton came up with this, I presume, because one afternoon he went to sleep in an apple orchard and his nap was rudely interrupted by an apple that fell on his head. The next day he decides it's too dangerous here, so he goes into a peach orchard and the same thing happens. And the third day he goes to a coconut orchard and this time it really hurts. So he scratches his head and said, it happened with apples, with peaches, with oranges, with coconuts. Aha, the light goes on. It must be because there's something called gravity, and the Earth is a mass much, much greater than the mass of any one of these little pieces of fruit, and it tracks in direct proportion to its weight as compared to the weight of the object, and therefore the heavier it is, the more it hurts. And lo and behold, you have the principle of gravity. The last person in the world who would have been surprised if somebody had told him, but I went to Gan Eden and I came back with a fruit that defies the rules of gravity. The person who would be least surprised would have been Newton. He would have said, I'll have to go out and figure what the fruit that I know have in common and why this exotic fruit is different. And apparently, the law of gravity isn't universal. It applies only to some things and not to others. That's why circumstantial evidence is not acceptable in halacha. You talk about something like fingerprint evidence. There is no logical reason that two people can't have the same sets of fingerprints. I know why they don't have the same set of fingerprints, because Chazal told us that kishem shein partzufeim shovim kach ein desein shovis. The Rabbi Yisroel made everybody with a different face, but apparently it's more than that. He didn't make everybody with just a different face, but even with different fingers. The faces of his fingertips are different, and that's why nobody has the same fingerprint. Why did the Rabbi Yisroel choose to do that? I haven't the vaguest idea. Why didn't he choose to make two people have the same face? How do I know? The Rabbi Yisroel didn't choose to create the universe in that way. If you will show me two people who have exactly the same parts of, it's not a violation of any law of nature. And you show me two people with the same fingerprints, it's not the violation of the law of nature either.
So Rav Bleich, would you not use DNA then in evidence in
DNA? DNA is a little bit different. DNA, the jury is out a little, in a certain sense, and that is because in Eretz Yisrael, the Batidin Rabbanim are in disagreement with regard to the admissibility of DNA evidence. DNA is different from other kinds of circumstantial evidence, not only because of statistical probability. Statistical probability is nothing more than empirical generalization, but because there is an identity, is a DNA stamp that is passed on from one generation to the next. And you have a continuum from parent to child to grandchild through the DNA. And DNA doesn't arise spontaneously, or at least in most cases.
So Rabbi, let me ask you.
We're talking about DNA evidence. You're trying to show me that there is a way of demonstrating that the parent is present in the child and that this is one and the same individual. Now, that doesn't account for mutations, because there are mutations. And mutations.
Rabbi, let me ask you two questions, okay? They found a pair of tzitzis in Masada that has the exact same DNA stamp as the Murex snail, which they believe is the Techeiles.
Yes,
so we have a DNA evidence. Let me just, and also the Gemara said, the Paiskim say in Tefillin they were mesupik if the halacha is like Rabbeinu Tam or Rashi. So they found a pair of tefillin, the Maril brings, and many of the Paiskim bring it on Kivrei Shal Yirmiyahu Hanavi, and it was written like Rashi, and that's one of the reasons that we paskin like Rashi. So we see both. We have DNA evidence and we have historical evidence here by the Techeiles. We have both DNA evidence and we have the historical evidence from the fact that they.
Let me talk first about Masada. The DNA evidence of Masada is extremely weak as far as halach is concerned. The people who lived in Masada were meaning. They were sectarians. They were apikurim. Whatever they had there is not what they say in Yiddish, maskeben. It doesn't prove very much of anything. The material that has appeared in the scientific literature in an attempt to identify what they call royal purple is much, much more compelling. We know that Techeiles was very expensive. That's why people engaged in fraudulent practices. They produced fake Techeiles, which is called elon. It came from some vegetable substance.
Indigo.
Whatever it is, indigo is a color. But whatever the kol elon was, it came from a vegetable substance. It didn't come from the chalozin. There is no question that the scientists are right with regard to royal purple. And there's no question whatsoever that there was some little creature, probably a sea creature, that was used to produce it. My only problem is that how do I know that what they were using was the chalozin? It could have been what I would have called a cousin of the chalozin, very similar in a lot of different ways, and it's not the same species. It's a different species. Just as you could have fruit that is similar to an esrog, and it's not an esrog, for a lot of different reasons, including harkova, including grafting. In this case, you may be dealing with different genealogy.
So what's the downside? Why wouldn't you do it? You've been mekayim so many mitzvahs. Why wouldn't you do it?
Why wouldn't I do it?
What's the downside of doing it?
There are two reasons. One is that I have no obligation whatsoever. That's all that the Beis HaLevi said, and it turned out to be absolutely correct, because he was responding to the Roginer, and it turns out that if there's anything...
It was a fraud. But the Beis HaLevi...
Nobody engaged the fraud purposely, to the best of my knowledge. But it turns out that it wasn't whatever they thought the Techeiles was, but it was the things that they were using in the processing that created color.
But the Beis HaLevi says over there's a negative Messiah. He says the cuttlefish has been around for 1,000 years, and none of our Zaydis used it. He says, so we have a Messiah that's the incorrect fish. Whereas here, We haven't had, the process was lost even by the Goyim for the last 1,400 years. It was discovered in the last number of years. So we do not have the negative Messiah. We have all the shells off the chelik of Zvulun, off of Tyre, off of Haifa. They have found huge mounds of shell.
That doesn't prove to me it's Techeiles. At most it proves, and even that is subject to further investigation. All it proves is that it was prevalent in antiquity and was used in some circles. They're assuming it was used in the royal circles, etc., but even that is, to the best of my knowledge, not established with certainty. All that they are proving is that there was something similar to Techeiles. Whether it's actually Techeiles or not has not been demonstrated and can't be demonstrated other than on the basis of the Torah. I think that was real, that the Beis HaLevi's really significant point was that we are Messiah people. And if we don't have a Messiah, we have no obligation.
Well, we lost the Messiah of Tefillin, and we still have Tefillin.
We haven't lost the Messiah of Tefillin by any means.
Well, we lost it in the time of Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. There was a disagreement how to do it.
There was a disagreement.
So it was clearly there was a loss of the
And what did Rashi's father wear, and what did Rabbeinu Tam's father wear?
Rabbeinu Tam was an anikel of Rashi.
I know he was an anikel.
So obviously the Messiah was lost.
How could the Messiah have been lost?
I don't know, but
people were putting on tefillin. There were clearly differences of opinion that predated both Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Neither Rashi nor Rabbeinu Tam would have taken upon himself to say that every pair of tefillin that we've had for generations is possible and that the tefillin have to be written some other way. That would have been a direct contradiction to the Messiah. Obviously, this was something that was a matter of some doubt with conflicting traditions of one kind or another, and you have each one trying to substantiate one particular position with regard to what the authentic tefillin should be. It's quite different from the case with regard to the Techeiles. I think that Beis HaLevi's real point was that we don't tamper with Messiah, nor do we create a Messiah where there is none. And in the absence of a Messiah, there's no obligation whatsoever. If there's no obligation whatsoever, I think that his basic underlying lesson was that this is Yeshua's, the Yontif of Matan Torah, it's the Yontif of the Messiah. Torah Shebal Peh comes together with Torah Shebiksav, and we don't even try to understand Torah Shebiksav without a Torah Shebal Peh. And Torah Shebal Peh and this Messiah, this tradition from generation to generation, are synonymous. And otherwise,
Turkey is the exception, you say?
Turkey is not an exception, because Chazal told us we can rely on Simonim. People later became firmer than Chazal, if I may use the expression. Chazal said to rely on their criteria, their simonim, their symptoms of what is a Tahor, and we were chayshish because, for whatever reason, primarily because we're city folk for the most part, and we don't really know these birds, and etc. And for all we know, just because we haven't seen that they are theirs, it doesn't mean that some members of the species aren't theirs. And later, when the schumra of the Ramah became widespread, the turkey had long been accepted. And it's not just because it was grandfathered in; it was because they saw not only dozens and hundreds, but in the words of the Achronim, alofim u'lovovos, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and no one has ever seen a single one that's theirs. So, and Turkey was extremely common, and that's why it was accepted. It's not against the Messiah. It's because Chazal told us that in this case, you don't need a Messiah. The same thing that I said with regard to the other non-kosher birds in Chumash, we haven't the vaguest idea what they are. The stones, the jewels that were used on the Chesh and the Ephod. Again, the King James translators seem to believe they know what it is. or they knew what it was in Latin, and somebody translated it into English, and they thought they knew what it was in English. As far as we're concerned, we don't have a Masorah. I haven't the vaguest idea what those are, and I've had the experience of discovering that there are certain schools that they try to teach the children the English definition of each one of the stones in the Cheshon of the Kohen Gadol. And my reaction is a chuckle. You're teaching them what the English translation told you is the meaning of these words in the Chumash. And how did they know? It's Arvach Arvach Tzorech. We don't have a Masorah for the identity of those Avonim. And if we don't have a Masorah, then the fact that we're teaching is incorrect. We have no business to try to teach people that this is what the word means if we don't know what the word means. And I think that that's basically what the Beis HaLevi meant to say, that if we don't have a Masorah, we can't tell people that we do, and it doesn't even create a suffix. Without a Masorah, we know nothing. If somebody will come and somehow be able to tell me that what we have found is Munach b'Chesami Shel Kohen Gadol, like the Pach Shemen that the Chashmonaim found, and they knew that this was a cruse of oil that didn't become Tomei because it had the seal of the Kohen Gadol. If you will, have a container.
Well, that's also not a Masorah, though. But there's no Masorah in that either. Then
you'll have to have a Masorah for the signature of the Kohen Gadol. You'll have to be Mekayim the Chesima. If you'll come and be made this is Techeiles, then I know it's Techeiles. Eliyahu Hanavi will come. He'll tell me this is Techeiles. If you will find some way, I don't know how you would do this. As I said, if you have a chesima of the Kohen Gadol, which you were mekayim with two other chesimas of the Kohen Gadol, obviously an impossibility, then we can talk about historical evidence. That becomes acceptable historical evidence.
You're saying, Rabbi, basically saying that simanim muvhakim do not help. We need a Masorah that's midayr l'dayr, and simanim muvhakim would not help.
Or the Techeiles, the Simonim and Hakim says the Beis HaLevi won't help.
So my question is, where did the Beis HaLevi get this new Yesod?
It's not a new Yesod.
Kol HaTorah Simonim of Hakim help. You could be Mater and Aguna. You could be Mater and Eishesish with Simonim of Hakim. Okay.
Because Isha Daiku Mitzvah. It's a different principle entirely.
In entire Torah, Simonim of Hakim help, but you could be Moitzi Mamin with Simanim of Hakim, but for Techeiles, you need a Masorah. Where does this side come from?
I'm defining a term. I don't know the definition of the term. Chumash is a Sefer Chosum. Every word of Chumash needs a translation. Moshe Rabbeinu gave Torah Shebiksav with a lexicon, and he had to explain the meaning of every word. Every word is used in a very narrow, technical, halachic sense. And he's identifying Techeiles as Techeiles. You have to know precisely what species the Techeiles is derived from.
But says Rayif, but I'll give you an example of one of the Rayif. I'll give you an example. The Gemara says there's only two things that have the exact same color. The Gemara says Kala Elon, which is the indigo tiffinaris. It's a type of a plant which they use for blue jeans, and it says and the chilazain. The only two colors we know from nature today, right, using all the colors of antiquity, are the Kala Elon and the chilazain. They're the exact same color. They're indistinguishable. Right, so we're using a siman from the Gemara, right? The Gemara says
you seem to believe that we have a Masorah for Kola Elon.
Kola Elon is indigo. It's the name of a plant.
So. Are you sure that what they're using in making jeans is Kola Elon?
Yes.
You think no?
There's only one plant in the world that gives blue.
I'm not aware of that.
No,
I'm not aware there's only one plant.
That's what Google says.
That's what Google says. I don't. I'm not aware of that.
There's only one plant in the world that this blue comes from. It's called Indigofera tinctoria.
Okay, that's what they're using today for that color. I'm not sure that it's the color of Kol Elon once upon a time. You think that even that wasn't subject to change, mutation, etc., over a period of centuries? I'm not sure that even if it's the same plant, that it looks the same as it did once upon a time. There are other things that have changed over a period of time. the color of blue jeans, I don't see my unscientific observation. Not all blue jeans look alike by any means. Not all of them have the same color. Even the blue jeans. I'm not talking about the takeoffs that have different kinds of color altogether. But I suspect very strongly that there are different ways that you can get whatever it is that dyes the blue jeans dye.
I'm just telling you that there are 10 rayas of this sort of Bleich. They're all from the Gemara. They're not made up.
Those rayas don't mean very much.
Okay.
Because you can't compare apples and oranges unless you first identified the apple and identified the orange. For that, I need the Messiah. I need the Messiah to tell me this is an apple and the Messiah to tell me this is an orange. And then we'll see whether they're one the same or they're not one the same. That is clearly the position of the Beis Halevi. You accept the Beis Halevi. Obviously, the Regina didn't accept the Beis Halevi. And apparently there are people out there who didn't either. But I look around and I see that Rav Binyan of people whose opinions count are not wearing Techeiles. And the only explanation is that either they're aware of the Beis Halevi explicitly, or that they have on their own intuitively discovered what the Beis Halevi said, and they're acting accordingly.
Well, it's been a very big honor to have you with us, and we thank you very much for your most valuable time. Thank you very much, Rabbi Bleich.
Thank you. Call too.
We have it with us on the phone from Eretz Yisrael, Harav HaGoyin Reb Nachum Eisenstein, who was a Meshamish B'Kodesh and a Talmid of the Paisik Hadoyer Rav Elyashiv for many years. He's also the Rav of Maalot Dafna, and he's also the head of the Vad HaRabbanim L'Inyan Geirus. He was put there by Moran Rav Elyashiv Zuchayin Levracha. Welcome, Reb Nachum.
Welcome to all the listeners, and especially to Yedidi Me'oz, Reb Dovid.
So, Haggai Reb Nachum, tell us, there are so many proofs, maybe 15 proofs that the Techeiles that we have today is the real Techeiles. And from the fact that Chazal say it grew with its shell, from the fact that it says it grew in the Sfunei Tzmunei Chayil, in the sand, in the thing, from the fact that the Rambam in the Pirush HaMishnayos in Kalim calls it a tzedef, which is a type of a clam, to the fact that it's brought in Chazal many times that it was Liad Sidon and Haifa, and that's where they found historically masses of the shells, to the fact that they found Techeiles in Masada, and they did a DNA test on it, and they said it comes from the murex snail. I mean, I have pages of rayas here. I can't imagine any Rav wouldn't be mater and arguna with these rayas. So then, why don't? And additionally, very powerful thing. A lot of people are mistaken, and they think, Techeiles, lava and enim akfen zoazu. But Rashi and the Ramban say clearly, you're only mekayim one of the two mitzvahs, which means it's a real bittul of mitzvah Techeiles. So given the fact that we have with Zeicha in the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, to the Hisgalos of the Techeiles, why don't some more people wear it?
Okay, just to answer your last question first, then we'll get back to the first question, and that's not out of order, because we know many times the Gemara answers the last question before going back to the first question, is that the reason why Baruch Hashem, I say, is that many more people don't wear it, is because the Gedolei Yisrael, who definitely are aware of all these rayas, etc., they said clearly not to wear Techeiles. All these things were presented to them, and if they said clearly not to wear Techeiles, so it's a mitzvah gdoila ma'oid lishmoya l'divrei chachamim. It's a much bigger mitzvah than the mitzvah kiyumis of Techeiles on the tzad that is Techeiles. So Baruch Hashem, the Roiv Minyan Ubinyan from Bnei Torah in the world do not wear Techeiles, because that was the shita from Moran Rabbi Yoshev, which you yourself said now he was the Paisik Ador, and therefore every Ben Torah is really obligated to listen to the Paisik But everyone held like that. The Shlomo Zalman held like that. Rav Osner held like that. Rav Moshe held like that. You can tell me Rav Moshe was a different kufa. He wasn't aware of all the rayas, but there's no question about it. Rav Moshe would have not make up something which the Messiahs is bottled, and we have to follow the Messiahs. The Messiahs of Techeiles was bottled, and since the Messiahs of Techeiles was bottled, until the Messiah is reestablished by Chazal, then we have no right with all these rayas. With all these rayas, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but we cannot reestablish a Messiahs based on scientific evidence. So I think that answers your question.
So let me just, Nachum, let me respond to this. The Maril clearly says, he says if it would be refound, he would do it again. So the Maril said that even though there's no Messiah, it wouldn't impede him if we were to find the Techeiles. Right?
Again, the question is, yes.
Let me add on. In Hilchos Tefillin it's brought, one of the rayas that was Saimach on Rashi and not Rabbeinu Tam, is that they found on top of the caver of Yirmiyah, they opened the box, they found an old pair of tefillin, and the tefillin were written Keseda of Rashi. And this is brought by all the Paiskim as one of the reasons to be Saimach Rashi. So you see, even though the Messiah was lost, the fact that they had a historical raya, not unlike finding the Techeiles in Masada now and doing a DNA. So you see, I'm bringing you a Maril, I'm bringing a halachic significance in the Messiah of Tefillin, which seemingly was lost, that they brought a raya from a historical fact.
And first of all, there's no raya whatsoever from Tefillin, because a pair of Tefillin was found, and it was written according to the Shita of Rashi. So it's not that they put together that this of 15 rayas, like you said, that this is Techeiles, that this is a pair of tefillin which was found, which is not a question of a historical fact. It's a metzias that it was a pair of tefillin, and they saw it was written, an old pair of tefillin, was written with al Pishitas Rashi. That's one.
But the Techeiles in Masada is real Techeiles.
First of all, if you learn your history properly, and again, I'm not a Barkin history, it's questionable who these people in Masada were. It's a question of which group of people they belong to. We know there were all kinds of different groups of people after the Beis Hamikdash who had all kinds of Tzedukim, etc., etc. But again, all these rayas which you're telling me, which again I'm not going to argue with you because this is not the place to argue. I go back to my original statement, which was very clear. And I think that Baruch Hashem, most Bnei Torah, Roiv, Minyan and Binyan, we're talking about 95%, if not more, that a mitzvah l'shmoi Gedol Yisrael, the Posek Ador, the Posek Ador, all the Gedolim of this door, they know all this information. Don't think they don't know it. Anyone thinks they don't know it, that's a Parshat that itself is also a bizayon and a disgrace to the halach of mitzvah l'shmaya divrei chachamim. They said in a very clear way not to wear Techeiles. I think there's nothing more to discuss, and it's worse than that. Anyone who wears Techeiles, anyway. So besides the fact that he shows that he thinks he's smarter than the Gedol Yisrael, and he thinks he knows better. But it's a very, very dangerous thing. And the people who push Techeiles now are very aggressive. They're very aggressive. And the bottom line is they're teaching people you do not have to listen to Gedol Yisrael because we know better. We can make up a new Messiah. And I've done some investigation, and I found a direct correlation. A very direct correlation. And the Techeiles people, these aggressive Techeiles people, which some of them are Talmid Chachamim, they're fine people, but they run astray a little with not listening to Gedol Yisrael, and they admit that there's a direct correlation between the Techeiles people and the people go to Harav. The Harabayis has the exact same problem. There are certain places in the Harabayis which a person is allowed to go. However, there's other places in the Harabayis which in Issachar, we don't have an exact Masoyrus, exactly how to measure and where to measure from. Ramosha, the Parshat Shelach, mentions this already in one of the earlier volumes of Ichus Moshe, that we lost the Masoyrus exactly how and where to count. I mean, the people go on counting, it's based on and also archaeological evidence from the Goyim, and they come and they know better. They know better.
But respectfully, Nachum, to go up to the Harabayis is not a mitzvah. You're not Mekayim anything. Here, every time you put on a beged of Daled Kanfis, it's a bittul asay biyadayim. So, even if we would agree there's places to go on the Harabayis, what do you need it for? What's selfless derais?
You're 100% right. If a person really has proper kavanah to daven, wherever he davens a Kosh Baruch Hu, if he has proper kavanah, he'll accept his tefillas. Most of these people go on Harabayis don't even daven. Many of the people don't even call themselves from, but it's here on the Senate. Exactly, I'm telling you now, and this is the point which I want to make clear, that this is leading to things that Techeiles leads to. We can make a reestablish lost Masoyrus. It leads to go up to Harabayis, like what you say. There's nothing to gain from it. There's no mitzvah. Okay, but you see, because of these Techeiles people, they're the exact same people who are pushing Harabayis, even though, like you say, there's no purpose in going up the Harabayis if they're smaller Suffolk. And tomorrow they'll do this, and the next day afterwards. It's a very, very dangerous movement. The people know better than anyone else, and they don't listen to Gedolei Yisrael, and it's a thing which has to be stopped. And everyone knows in the proper Dalet Amos of Bnei Torah, people who respect the Gedolei Ador, the Parshat Ador, that anyone who goes with Techeiles, he's putting a red scarlet on his beged saying, "Ha! I know better than you. I fight from the Gedolei Ador." And the chutzpah. But anyone who goes with Techeiles is saying that I know better than the Gedolei Ador.
So Nachum, let's continue then. By the way, about the Masoyrus, the Beis Halevi writes, when he writes to the Radzina Rebbe, the first one who tried to be Mechadish Techeiles, he writes that there's a Masoyrah against the cuttlefish, which was the fish that the Radzina took it from. He says because the cuttlefish was commonly found for all the generations, and the fact that our Zaydis and the Rabbanim that preceded us did not use the cuttlefish is a raya that it's the wrong one. So he implied implicitly that if they would find a new Hamtzah, which there was no negative anti-Masoyrah against, he would have been maskim to. But he says, if they knew about this fish and they didn't use it, clearly it's not the Techeiles. So I'm just showing you the Beis Halevi himself did not seem to tie it to Masoyrah.
Okay, so Rabbi Yoshev, let me tell you, Rabbi Yoshev always used to quote this Beis Halevi, and he says with the 15 scientific proofs, the proofs they have today, he says tomorrow someone's going to come, they'll come up with 30 proofs that it's something else. So that's, and then 10 years later, and this was happening. There's the Regina, and even today, there's two different types of Techeiles which people are marketing. There's this Techeiles and that Techeiles. Baruch Hashem, I'm not a muvhak because, as far as me, all Techeiles is the same thing. It's an open attack against Gedolei Yisrael to say I know better.
So let's go back. So why wouldn't Rabbi Elyashiv accept the 15 rayas?
Because the Masoyrus was lost. And in tomorrow you'll have 15 rayas, and this is what he told me clearly, that the next day, another year, or who knows when, they'll come up with 30 rayas that it's something else.
So let's assume...
Simple as that.
I understand, but look, you have a DNA raya from a historical event. You have the big mounds off of Tzidain. You have, there's really strong rayas. You can't make up new rayas. So let me ask you another question.
Stronger rayas.
So let me ask you another question. At the very least, it should be a suffix daraisa. And we know the Mishnah Berurah Lamashal writes that if somebody has a tefillin that he's unsure of whether they're kosher or not, He says you put them on, al safik deraisa, even if after you put them on, you don't know if you were yaitz to the mitzvah, because safik deraisa. So why wouldn't we? People take, how many esrogim does an average young man go? He buys 3 esrogim, maybe this is a murkiv, maybe this is not, maybe this is here, it's not one time a year, it's one, the mitzvah's esrog is one, the first day is a deraisa, maybe outside of Yerushalayim for sure, it's just the first day. So people go, they shopping for esrogim and esrogim. Here you could be Mekayim every day of your life in other mitzvah. Why don't you say safik deraisa l'chumra on it?
For the simple reason, again, and I think, Reb Dovid, you're missing the point. The point is that we have a tefillin, which is a safek, it's kosher safek. No, we know that there's a mitzvah tefillin, and there's halachas, and we know how to make tefillin. So here's the shiloh with this tefillin, the kosher or not. Avadik vis is a safek deraisa. You have to put on the tefillin just if you have a safek and daled minim also. But over here, since the Messiah was lost, we cannot be mechadish the Messiah. And by being mechadish the Messiah, which even though it might be right, it might be the right Techeiles, but we lost the Messiah, and by doing this, it's very, very dangerous. It's very dangerous because tomorrow they'll be, not tomorrow, this was already yesterday, they were machadish to Messiah, Techeiles, they know how to go in Harav, and then the next day they'll say something else, and because of that, things which we don't know clearly has the din of Chodesh Osam and the Torah. And Elyashiv was very, very makpid about this. After they when this Messiah started becoming a little more popular, must have been 10 years ago, I can't tell you the exact year, but when I first discussed it with him, he told me definitely Pasha, there's no Shaili, told me the Beis Levi then, and then even family members ask him what to do, and he tell everyone, I don't wear Techeiles. And then afterwards, and I asked him to write me a letter then, because I saw that this Magefa was spreading, and he told me it's not necessary to write a letter. But you'll see, several years later, he did write a letter, which was published. It was written to the Grain Revival Cohen in America, and after he saw that this Magefa was spreading so much, and Rabbi Yosef didn't like writing letters, but he saw that people were doing things which may eventually come to Dvarim Chamurim. Like you say, wearing Techeiles is not the end of the world. Maybe Mekayim the mitzvah, and maybe not Mekayim the mitzvah, and there's really no Isser involved. That's for sure not. It's besides the Isser of the mitzvah Shmuel Divrei Chachamim, but it's a very, very dangerous trend, and it has to be stopped.
So can I ask you a question? Can you think of an example in halacha where the gedolim or a gadol or a paisik is mevatel a mitzvah hasei biyadayim because he's afraid there would become a michshel out of it?
No one's being mevatel anything. We're not being mechadish new things. And we know that the klal is the chodesh osam and the Torah. So no one is being mevatel anything. The Messiah for many years was, since there was no Messiah, was not to wear Techeiles, and it's not being mevatel. People want to institute Techeiles now. They're making chodesh. They're making something else. So it's not that we're being mevatel. It's not that the Gedolei Yisrael being mevatel. The Gedolei Yisrael continue doing what their fathers did, the Zaydas did, and the Elter Zaydas did.
Who didn't have it? Let me ask you one last question, and we'll move on to a new topic. It seems from the Rishonim that there was a period where the Messiah on Tefillin was lost, right? And they had to bring rayas that, like Rabbeinu Tam or like Rashi, would have there been a tzad at that point not to wear Tefillin because the Messiah was lost?
Definitely not, because there was no Tefillin is not a thing which is a Messiah. Tefillin is a din in the Gemara. It says how to write the parshas. There's a machlekes of Rishonim, how to do it. Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, etc. But it's not a thing which is telling them Messiah. In the Messiah, it's a halacha how to do it. But it's not something which is telling them Messiah. There's no comparison to Tefillin to Techeiles.
Hagayin Reb Nachum, it's always a great honor to have you with us.
And it's also a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to speak to you because it's you give me the opportunity. You give me the opportunity to vent it's good for my health also to get out what things which I feel are being done against the Gedolei HaPoskim, which I discussed of being Mishtamish Yom for 25 years.
Thank you very much. In closing, what does it say? We have many rayas for Techeiles. what seems to be the main reason why not, those who don't, is because they say we just somehow lost the tradition. We don't have the ability to regain a tradition, even if we have ample proof. I leave it to you, my brilliant, amazing group of co-listeners, to say, I don't know, should we be Mekayim Mitzvahs Techeiles? Signing off this week, Parshat Shelach, the Parsha of Tzitzis. This is David Lichtenstein for Headlines Radio.